different name, and this has served to just confuse us. When all is said and done, to be one's our revolution. We never stand alone, 'cause unity's our resolution.
Alafia, I'm Dr. Gloria L. Peace, host and producer of Omni Presents the H3O Art of Life show. And I'm here with the doctor in the house. In fact, I don't know really how to tell you about Dr. Terry Mason, because he wears all these hats, and when I tried to find out from him which hat he preferred me to reference, he didn't ever respond. I couldn't get an answer. So I'm just going to say that you know him because he's a radio talk show host. You may not know that he's a chief operating officer for the Cook County Department of Public Health. I did not know that he actually has a private practice as a urologist, and there are just dozens of other things. If you Google him, you can spend the night reading about all of the things that he does. But the most interesting, fascinating thing that he does, and I just told him, and I hope he wasn't offended when I called him an oxymoron, because it meant that he just doesn't go together. In other words, he is a medical doctor who is getting people to do things that most doctors don't recommend that they do because they don't know to recommend these things. And so I want you to just tell me about that journey, how you got involved in the diet, the plant-based diet, all these things that you do to make people healthy so we won't need you. You're putting yourself out of business.
Well, I look at it this way. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity to come and be on your show and to share with you and your audience what I pray is some helpful information. First of all, I have to say that I understand and have accepted the fact of the ordering of my steps. And so when we do that, I was sitting at church one Sunday, and I've told this story many times. I was sitting at church, Trinity United Church of Christ, and a number of things had transpired. Prior to that, and I'll come back to that, but prior to that, when I was 18, 19 years old, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was making a call for us having our own hospital. And because I'd seen all the other things that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had done, I decided that I wanted to be a physician in that hospital that we were going to build. We started out with trying to do it over on what is on the 83rd or 82nd and King Drive. But the city blocked it by creating a park there. And then we wanted to buy what is the South Shore Cultural Center.
I remember that.
And we had cash money to buy it, and they blocked that by creating annexing it as part of the park system, if my memory serves me correctly. But nevertheless, the need for us to do was still there, and at that time Providence Hospital was still a hospital that we had some degree of ownership and control. And through that motivation from the Nation of Islam, I went on to be a biology major at Loyola University, and then become a medical student at the University of Illinois, then did general surgery training and then urologic training, and became a board-certified urologist, and practiced for about 25 years in the city of Chicago. Mm. And the journey to urology was an interesting one, basically because when we looked at all of the health stats, black people had the worst, but of the black people who had the worst, black men were the worst among the worst. Mm-hmm. And that made sense. I understood that. And I said, well, maybe I can take what I've learned, I can use the communication skills that I've been blessed with to try and understand this problem and to help men understand the role that they must play in a participatory way with their health. That put me on a whole nother path, as I learned more about erectile dysfunction, and I wrote that book at that time called Making Love Again, but when we learned more about erectile dysfunction, the real cause of the erectile dysfunction, and we began to notice that one of the things we did was when people came in, we worked them up. And we found that many of these men were diabetic, and they didn't even know it. Mm. And why that was so was because diabetes is a disease that attacks the very small blood vessels in the body, particularly the small blood vessels that supply the nerves. And that's why people who are diabetic, they get this numbness, they get these neuropathies, they get all these different problems. But more importantly, those same blood vessels that supply the nerves also supply the eyes, which is why diabetics end up with problems.
Which is why some people lose their sight.
That's right, because those blood vessels are attacked. They're from an inflammatory point of view. And then the larger blood vessels, the ones that supply our heart and our brain and our legs, and they're also involved. And that is when we looked at what was causing that. It was the foods that we were eating that were causing those things.
Soul food.
Well, it's not good for the soul, that's for sure. And it was an adaptation. It wasn't our diet. It never was our diet. It wasn't anything that we should have ever claimed. It was, in many ways, an adaptation to a circumstance that we had to deal with. And so we made the best out of what we could. But because most of our so-called soul food diet at that time was still mostly plants. It was greens, it was beans, it was grains like cornbread, it was rice, and there was fruits, but it wasn't. There was never. I mean, I'm one of 10 kids. I grew up and we never had much meat. You know, my mother would make a big pot of neck bones, and anybody knows anything about a neck bone, not much meat on a neck bone, but there were beans in there, and between the beans and the greens and the rice or the cornbread, those things were filling in more ways than one. And obviously we had fried chicken and things that need, but that wasn't every day. On Sundays.
Didn't have chicken every day.
Did not have it every day. And did not have hamburgers, you know, or hot dogs or some of the, we did have them from time to time as we got older, but those things, and sausages and things of that nature, those things were things that we had rarely. And so our diets were still, when we think of soul food, it still should be thought of predominantly as more vegetables and fruits. Sweet potatoes. I mean, we use a lot of things with sweet potatoes. Now, we use a lot of butter and a lot of sugar and other stuff with it, but we did those things. And I say that to say that what's really causing, and we're still leading in death rates, and that's a whole nother conversation I could have another time. But what's really important and what the listeners need to understand is that what we're eating now is highly processed foods. They're not real. If it comes out of a box or a bag, other than a bag of beans, but if it comes out of a jar or a can, or it's processed. And so when you look at the kinds of foods that we're eating, we're eating today, especially our younger people, because no one's got time or want to take the time, even though it doesn't take that much time to cook. Everybody wants something they can grab and go. And we're pouring things out of boxes and putting milk on it, where those things are highly sugared, they are highly processed, they're not really good things for us to eat.
Everything that was good about it has been removed.
Everything, yes, all of the vitamins, that's why they have to refortify it, because everything has been taken out of it. And so these are the things, there's, you know, in addition to get back to the journey, as I learned, as I was going through, and even though I was treating these men with erectile dysfunction, I was more fascinated with why they had erectile dysfunction, as opposed to that they had erectile dysfunction. And when we looked at, there was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that looked at men who had erectile dysfunction. And what they noticed, and they looked at men in a lot of different categories, that men who had a heart attack, men who had a stroke, men who had abnormal heart rhythms or abnormal heartbeats, men who died from any sort of from congestive heart failure, men who died for almost any cause had erectile dysfunction first. Now you say, well, what's the relationship? Well, that relationship is that those blood vessels all over the body. You just don't have a blocked blood vessel in your heart. If you got a blocked blood vessel in your heart, you got one in your brain. You got them in your legs, because that same process is over your entire body.
Circulatory system.
It's the entire, it's all involved, not parts of it, all of it. And so it made sense that erectile dysfunction, which was that sort of quote unquote early warning system, because the blood flow in the penis was critically dependent upon these arteries being open, and these very small arteries that supply the penis and also help bring blood into the penis were important in order to get or maintain an erection. So that was the first real clinical thing, in quotes, that we saw that let us know. So what ended up happening is guys would come in with complaints of erectile dysfunction. We worked them up, found out they were diabetic, because they may not have ever gone to another doctor. And so I ended up sending a lot of them to say, hey, you need to get this done. And then we also sent them for stress tests. We also sent them for all these other things, because that's what we found was the real problem.
So it was a blessing that they got something that would get their attention.
Exactly. And it got their attention because thanks to shows like this, and I've done many shows here with Munir Muhammad and others, where we got the information out. And that's what's so valuable about what you're doing, because it gets information out.
The thing that's baffling to me is that you find this widespread phenomena, and yet you don't get the proper response, because you get all of these things that correct erectile dysfunction. You know, all they want to do is get an erection. So you give somebody something that will get an erection, they still have the diabetes, they still, whatever these other attending disorders are, they still have those. So what kind of treatment is this, that you ignore the cause or the root of the problem and treat the symptom and leave the root untouched so that it can continue to grow and spread throughout other systems in the body, doctor?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll answer it this way. My entire medical education, and not just mine, but medical education in general in the United States, is not aimed at cause. It's aimed at complications. So we treat a complication, a heart attack. We treat a stroke. We treat a cancer. We treat a blockage of some sort. We treat a benign tumor or a malignant tumor. That's what we do. We don't cure anything. So you go to a doctor and you have high blood pressure, you'll get your medicine to manage your blood pressure. And it needs to be managed, but it won't cure it. Your diabetes is managed, but it's not cured. Your cancer is managed, but it's not cured. Even though you may have surgery, and they say you may have a cure, but if you were truly cured, why would you ever need to go back? If you were truly cured. So you have to go back, because there's always the possibility that whatever it was could recur. So our system, our medical system, is built around procedures that remove tumors, but may not remove all the cancer, remove the cancer. Because you got to remember, these things are not, even though they may be in the breast, or they may be in the prostate, or they may be in the lung, but the lung and the prostate and the breast are all fed by blood vessels that take blood all over the entire body. So these cells can at any time hitch a ride in the bloodstream and end up going to other parts of the body. We call that metastasis.
Yes.
That's what we call it. But what we don't do is we don't have a way, or have not really made popular a way, that we can actually activate the immune system in the body to help recognize and use that system to help fight the cancers. We're never going to get we're never, as long as we're drinking, and I can tell you, there's studies now that show that dairy, whether milk, eggs, eggs are not dairy, but that's poultry, but milk, cheese. Well, cheese is just concentrated milk. That's what cheese is. And the truth, you know, one of the things I went to start going to these lectures as I was making my own transition, where someone said, well, there was no reason for us to drink milk. The only milk that humans should drink
is human milk.
Is human milk that comes from the breast of the mother. Once you have weaned, like all other animals, once you are weaned from the mother's breast, that's it.
End of milk.
That's the end of milk. And every species except us, or a species impacted by us, understands that, and that's what they do. So it's not necessary for us to be drinking.
It's not normal.
Well, you know, Dr. Clapper always says, he calls it mammary growth fluid. And that's what he calls milk. And milk is the perfect food, at least cow's milk, is the absolute perfect food for baby cows, for baby calves.
Yes.
It's designed to take a 65-pound calf and put it on track to become a 400-pound cow. That's what it's designed to do. Why is that important? Well, how do you go from 65 pounds to 400 pounds? Well, your muscle cells have to get bigger, your bones have to get bigger, everything has to get bigger and stronger. Well, that's the job of the cow. You don't, as a human, you have other things that you can do that will help you get there. And in order for them, the cow, to get there, there are many constituents in the food, in the milk of the calf, that helps to put it on that path. And so this calf then has, I mean, the milk that comes from the mother that the calf is drinking contains things like insulin growth factor 1. Insulin growth factor 1 is one of those things that stimulates cells to grow. So if you're in a situation where you already have abnormal cells growing, like a cancer, do you think it's a good idea to be eating something that stimulates cells to grow?
If you are already overweight, do you think it's a good idea to be consuming something that will cause cells to grow?
It's just so simple to me.
But people are not taught this. When you have health classes at school, in high school usually, at least that's where I had the health classes that I took, it's mostly about maturation. It's mostly about reproduction. It is not about maintaining good health. No one teaches you how to maintain good health. You get advice about the approved list of things that you must eat, but those things that are on the approved list have been lobbied onto that list, so that they are on that list not because they are essential, but because some industry has enough influence to be able to get them on that list. So you will see dairy on that list, when most people can't even tolerate the casein that's in cheese if it were not also a dairy product, what they have to do to process it. And the body, I've learned, is a very intelligent thing. It understands incomplete foods as junk, and in order to process things that are not complete, it searches itself to find out what it would take to complete it, and then it does that. So I'm told that sugar, when it is processed, when it's refined, is missing the molecule of calcium that's supposed to be there, and the body recognizes that, so it searches itself and finds the calcium in the bones and the teeth, which is why you have cavities.
Well, the same thing is true with milk. The same thing, you know, people, they say, well, you need milk for strong bones and teeth, as you've mentioned. But if that was true, then why is osteoporosis highest in those countries that drink a lot of dairy? And that's because the milk, according to what we've read, what that means is because when you drink large amounts of, you drink milk, it causes a relative metabolic acidosis. That acidity in the body has to be counteracted with something that will neutralize an acid, which is a base. That base is then constructed leaching calcium and phosphorus out of the bones in order to create the buffer to neutralize that. So no, it's quite the contrary. Milk, in fact, doesn't necessarily build strong bones and teeth. From the data that we look at,
it robs the bones.
Exactly. And so the same thing is done with animal-based products. We talked about the damage to the lining of the blood vessels. One of those constituents is called cholesterol, among other things that are in the bloodstream. Well, cholesterol is only two sources. Our own livers make all the cholesterol we need, our own livers make, because all our hormones and whatever are built on a cholesterol molecule. So, but our livers will make that. What we have to do, or what we've done, is we eat all of this stuff, and then these things float around in our bloodstream. They alter the internal working of our blood vessels. That creates an inflammatory response. And if you were to look at a cholesterol crystal, it has sharp spikes on it. So these crystals can be seen that actually rupture through blood clots in the blood vessels that cause heart attacks and strokes and things of this nature. So if we were really serious about trying to get to decrease the amount of heart attacks, so-called heart attacks and so-called strokes, and they're both the same thing, by the way. They're both the same. Whether or not the blood is blocked that feeds a blood vessel in the heart, I have a lecture where I give, they say, well, what is that? They call it a heart attack. You ask people the number one cause of death, they'll say heart attack. And I say, no, that's not the number one cause of death. Because what's a heart attack? Well, they say it's a blockage in the blood vessel. So I say, well, how did the blood vessel get blocked? Well, there was something that caused some irritation, and the body was trying to heal that, like create an internal clot, and sometimes that breaks off and goes, or the blood vessel gets so tight that the blood can't flow in it. I said, well, where did that come from? How did that get to the blood vessel? Well, it was in the blood. Well, how did it get in the blood? It got in the blood from what we ate. That's the only way it could get there. So, and that blood flows through every single blood vessel in our entire body. So if you've got heart disease, you're already a setup for a stroke. If you had a stroke, you're already a setup for a heart attack. Why? Because it's the same problem. It's not different. And whether you got poor circulation in your legs, that's the same problem. So yeah, we can go in with our stents and our balloons, and we can, but we can open it up and bring some temporary relief, but it only treats the complication. It does not treat the cause. If you want to work at the level of causation, you have to do what is necessary to remove the cause. And that is not put the food in your mouth that goes to your stomach, in your small intestine, gets absorbed, and ends up in your bloodstream. You want to put the things in your bloodstream that won't do that.
Right.
And guess what those things are? That's water, plants, and plants. That's it.
Water, plants, and plants.
And plants. You know, whether the plants are vegetables
Right.
or fruits.
Right.
And it's a natural thing, because our Creator was good enough to create water and create the sun and the earth. And the earth, until we mess with it, contains all of those trace minerals that we need. And the light from the sun travels 196 million miles in about 12 seconds to reach the earth, traveling at 186,000 miles per second.
In a hurry to get here.
And that light strikes the leaf, and that leaf takes that sunlight, and even though it looks as white, but it's many, many colors, which is why we have so many different colors and different chemicals that plants give us. We call those antioxidants. But those rich colors and those deep purples, those reds, those oranges, those greens, and that plant has a natural relationship to us as humans.
The body recognizes them.
It recognizes them because that's what it's looking for.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. So that sunlight that comes in through a process called photosynthesis, basically the plant takes the carbon dioxide, the gas out the air, it takes the sunlight and the water out of the roots and those trace minerals, and it makes sugar, glucose, and gives off oxygen. Now, why is that important? Because we breathe in
out carbon.
We breathe out carbon dioxide, and we breathe in
oxygen.
And that's a natural marriage. Those plants are our lungs. They are the ones that provide us with oxygen. We cut all that stuff down. We create these cities. We have cars and all these other things that put up.
We have asphalt.
Yes, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. All I'm saying is that we're disturbing sort of the natural balance. This is why people who live potentially out on farms or out in areas where there are lots of trees and there's a lot of oxygen being placed back. That's why the Amazon rainforest is so important. And unfortunately, they're cutting it down at an enormous rate to do what? To create farmland to grow cattle. For what? To graze. And so the animal agriculture is costing the planet. Do you know that animal agriculture, that is raising animals to eat, is far more costly to the environment than all of the exhaust from cars and planes and trains put together?
And do you know that raising animals is a cost for hunger across the planet? That it takes more of the resources,
Absolutely.
The water and the grain and the space to raise animals than it would if we were not raising animals, because then we could grow food and grain to feed people.
That's right. A 1/3 pound hamburger has a water footprint of 600 gallons.
Ridiculous.
600 gallons of water are used to make a 1/3.
And there are places on the earth where people have to walk for miles
today
to get water. Yes.
Yes, that's true.
To get clean water.
And then it may not be as clean as you want it to be.
Right.
You're absolutely right. So there's a number of great movies out there. If people want to learn more about those, I don't know if I can mention them on your show.
Of course you can. One that you, down at the theater on 87th Street, remember the movie that you sponsored? Which one was that? Food Incorporated?
Food Inc.
Food Inc., yeah.
Food Inc. was one. We also did Forks Over Knives.
Okay.
Also, there's a book called Cowspiracy.
Okay.
There's one that's called What the Health.
Okay.
There's a number of movies where people can get information.
And there is a very good book by Laila O. Africa called Nutricide, which if you just really want to see the whole thing laid out in very simple terms, it is there.
Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn wrote a book on how to prevent and reverse so-called heart disease. And he showed in a number of patients in a scientific study that these patients who had stents and they clogged them up, they had bypasses and they clogged them up, and they went to a whole food, plant-based way of eating, and they opened up again. These blood vessels opened up again.
Well, you know what I think? I think that you have been very straightforward in saying this is what modern medicine trains doctors to do. Therefore, we should not expect them not to do what they have been trained to do.
That's right.
However, as the other side of the equation, our responsibility is to do not only what they have not been trained to do, but to go beyond that and to show them by taking some of the responsibility for maintaining our own health by doing all the things that you're suggesting, the plant-based diet, this sort of thing, to let them see that they may need to begin to practice what is called integrated medicine if not traditional medicine, because I think that they are going to have to be most doctors are going to have to be convinced that you can live, that you can thrive from having a plant-based diet. Because the first thing I was told was, well, where are you going to get your protein? And my answer was, how do you get protein from something that is dead? Because if you're telling me that I need a carcass, I need to get a dead animal to get something to sustain my life, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't believe you can get protein out of things that are dead. I think you're going to need to get proteins off of something that is nearer to you in the food chain and has more likelihood of really giving you that which it claims to be providing. So, but the thing is, people always, that's the first question they ask you, if you leave meat out. And they don't notice that meat is high in uric acid, which contributes to all kinds of health problems. I have one family member who I'm going to send this tape to, who brags about the kinds of meat that he consumes and how he's cooking on the grill and how he's got this and he's got that, and he's very proud of this. He is not going to be convinced that he cannot continue to revel in these kinds of things that are health destroying until he gets something that has gone to that extent.
And it's already there, it just hasn't caused a problem
And almost always when people get to one of those problems, the first thing they're willing to do is to now listen to people who've been telling them all along that you really, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad came out with his book, How to Eat to Live, he was trying to tell people, do not eat for your appetite. Don't participate in the thrill of eating. Get involved in eating so that you can sustain your life. I think he got through to his own followers, but the rest of the world does not seem to have caught up with that idea yet.
Well, he did write a great book, and I was very moved by what he wrote in that book. And to your point that you made just a moment ago about barbecuing, let me tell you something about barbecuing.
Oh, no.
When you charbroil meat, those black marks that you get, there's data that suggests that these polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which is what they're called, are created. These things may have a role in cancer production. We already know, and there are groups of physicians, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I mean, people like Dr. Alvenia Fulton, people like some of our own heroes that have been talking about this. Not only what to eat, but when not to eat, how to fast,
right,
which is also very important. And we don't talk about that enough.
Yes.
But I know this from my own personal experience. I used to be one of those guys that ate a steak every day a long time ago. I mean, I haven't done that for years now. But it is when you see the data and if you're open and honest with what you're looking at, once you see this, I'm not talking about having people going on some sort of diet. No, this is eating to live. This is eating to live. This is truly eating to live. And
this is not a temporary.
No, it's not temporary. This is if you want to live. That's right. We don't eat enough fiber, which is why many of the pharmaceutical or the drugstores in our community have a whole wall full of things for people who are constipated. You wouldn't be constipated if you drank water and ate plants. You wouldn't be. And when I say plants, that includes beans, greens, legumes, all of grains, those things. And they say, well, where are you going to
grows?
Something comes out of
the ground.
Yeah, so, and the reason I say that is because most of people say, to your point, well, where are you going to get your protein? In this society, we have been hoodwinked to believe that protein is synonymous with meat, when all of the animals that you eat for meat don't eat meat themselves.
That's like cows eat grass.
And they get, obviously, if they can grow the muscle mass from that, from clover and other things that they're eating, Now we taught them to eat soy and
hogs
corn.
eat slop.
Well, I mean,
I lived on a farm. You just, whatever you had for dinner, went into the bucket and maybe some kind of water or something, and it was thrown to the hogs. But hogs would eat anything, so if anything showed up, they ate it. But the point is, they didn't go around looking necessarily for meat to eat. They ate what we ate.
That's right. And all of the largest mammals on the planet
Are herbivores.
are herbivores. Some of the largest dinosaurs, maybe not the T-Rex, but the Brontosaurus and Stegosaurus and a lot of those theoretical dinosaurs, these were all herbivores. And we're herbivores. Our mouth,
We're
our
not
esophagus.
designed to handle meat. In fact, Dr. Africa says that the animals who do consume meat eat it while it is alive with the blood running warm in its veins. They don't eat dead animals. They
Yes.
kill them and eat them while the blood is still fresh.
And the blood, that same blood that's in the flesh that we're eating is actually causing the inflammation in our blood vessels, because the blood is made of a few things, and hemoglobin is one of them. And the heme part of the hemoglobin has an iron moiety in it. And that iron, that ferrous, that iron part is an inflammatory agent. That's what I've read in some things, that it's an inflammatory agent. So that's one of the things that create a problem. Now the other thing is that we have been so bombarded with these messages. Now we have 60, 70-inch television screens, and now you can see huge pieces of burgers or pizzas or whatever on these things, and they're done in such a way to stimulate you subconsciously to want to eat that at 2 o'clock in the morning if necessary. Right. And now we have ways that you can get these things delivered to you. The rise of fast food. Right. When I was growing up, we didn't have that many fast food places, thank God. We
restaurants closed on holidays because nobody went to them. Now they do booming businesses. Where's your family that you have to be sitting out somewhere in a restaurant on a holiday when we used to all be together?
Yes.
And somebody made the meal, or maybe several people made the meal. But
and there was also this camaraderie, and there was fellowship.
What
I just
fellowship?
was at
when you in your car?
Yeah, you using your car as your dining room.
Drive up.
Or drive through.
Drive through, because you can't walk across the parking lot, because that would mean you would be getting exercise.
That's right.
So we're sedentary. My mother was a farm girl. My father was a farmer. And I know that they drank clean water because it came from a well and from a spring. I know that they ate fresh food because it came from the garden and from the farm. I know that even the meat that they ate was fresh meat, and if it was smoked in a smokehouse without nitrates to artificially give it the taste of smoking. So I know she walked miles to school, and I know they had a very arduous life because I lived it during the summers, having to go chop cotton and corn and all of this kind of thing. So the thing is that these people not only had fresh water and fresh food and a majority plant-based diet, but they were very active. And so any kinds of toxic things that they took in, they were exercising them out because they were using their bodies. Now we're sitting on a couch with a remote. We don't even have to get up and turn the TV on or get up and turn it off or change the channel. We can sit here for hours on end, circulation at a standstill. Nothing going on with the circulation. Blood just pooling wherever it finds a place to pool. You cannot maintain good health with the lifestyle that we live.
And we don't.
And we are we mourn harder than anybody else when somebody dies, and we're always shocked when somebody dies at a very young age because it's not supposed to happen. You know, here's a young man who's just 40 and he's had a heart attack, or a young woman who is just, you know, in her early midlife, and, you know, she's got some kind of terminal illness. We don't make the connection at all that it has something to do with the way that we live. And maybe we could live, you know, you point out somebody who was a jogger and did all the stuff and they died early, okay. But you can't get a statistic on that. You are not going to get hundreds and thousands of people who live a healthy lifestyle going out like that. But you will get hundreds and thousands of people who have the kind of lifestyle we're talking about.
Sure, and we've looked at, there's a book called Blue Zones, and I was at a talk where one of the gentlemen that were responsible for that, and he went and visited these areas where people lived, many of them to 100, and they looked at, well, what were they doing? How did they do that? And some of those things, that yes, it had to do with the foods that they ate and they drank, but everything they did was fresh. Every food that they had was
even
fresh.
The cow's milk came right out of the cow in the morning. They were down in the barn getting the milk.
And it wasn't full of hormones.
It wasn't full of anything.
Or antibiotics.
Right.
You know, the leading causes of antibiotic resistance.
Full of grass.
Yeah, well, the leading cause of antibiotic resistance today is we feed our animals antibiotics.
Right.
We eat the animals, the chickens.
And the
all,
antibiotics don't die.
No, and they're in the meats and stuff that we're eating, and now we're seeing some of this antibiotic resistance.
Right.
This is what's reported is being transferred to us. So there are many things that you said are absolutely true. And we didn't have to worry about that. When I was growing up, we didn't have to worry about going to someplace artificial to exercise. That was just part of our natural, that was called play.
You didn't have to join the health club.
No, you didn't have to do any of that because we walked, I lived in Inglewood and I had to walk 10 blocks to school in the morning and 10 blocks home every day. And we did it because we could and we had to at those days, but there were a number of things. Nowadays, we don't even have to get up to answer the phone. Talk about change the TV. We don't get up to answer remember in the old days you had to get up, go to the room where the phone was and answer the phone. And you may have to stand there for a while.
You did have to stand there for a while because the cord wasn't long enough for you to go nowhere and sit down.
Right.
Then they made a little chair that you could sit in and talk on the phone.
Well, I mean, it was just those things are what's happening. So now, and I'm really worried as we look at, we got people today bigger than they've ever been. Children bigger than they've ever been. And this is not cute. I mean, unfortunately, we made obesity from one point more socially acceptable. And that, in my mind, is not a healthy thing because that's not a healthy situation. Well,
it isn't a healthy situation.
It's not. And people say, well, I got big bones.
We're going to be, they call it discrimination. All I want you to do is live. I want you to
live.
Be healthy.
I want you to live.
I like what your church is doing.
Yes.
This long since should have started.
Pastor Moss has been amazing.
Churches long since have had the ear and the attention of large numbers of people. And they have been in a position to provide the kind of education that you're doing at your church. I'm so glad that you're doing that because I hope it will be contagious. I hope other churches will follow that guide.
Well, I'm doing so many lectures at different churches now, and I thank God for that opportunity.
Okay.
I'm appreciative to Pastor Moss, who actually took our Bible study and changed the Bible study on Wednesday night, at least for these past few weeks, and we've got 2 more to go because we're going to do the first Wednesday in October as well at 7 o'clock at Trinity on 400 West 95th Street. But we're going to be talking about a number of topics. This next one coming up, and I don't know when you're sure we'll air, but this one coming up this coming Wednesday, which will be the
October to something.
Yeah, it'll be October to something, 3rd or 4th. But whatever that Wednesday will be, we're going to be talking about the miseducation of the Negro. And that miseducation is going to talk about how we've been miseducated about food, how we've been miseducated about ourselves, and what that's done that helps us with a short life and an early death. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about some other things that following Wednesday night. So, and it's an hour. It's at 7 o'clock, and it's just a great thing that's going on.
Look, I salute you because you are a man of, you have obviously some ethics that you learned at home. Somebody in your family must have put some very good child rearing in, because they have turned out a fine specimen. I would be very proud of you if you were my son, and since you're not, I'll just claim you anyway.
Well, that's all right.
Okay, but the thing is that more of us who have a forum, who have a voice, must use that voice to help to educate our people. And I don't even like to use the word education when it comes to you can't miseducate. Either you educate or you don't. Whatever else it is you're doing cannot be called education, because education comes from within. Okay, you go within to find that which you already know. These are things that resonate with people because they already knew. We already, somewhere deep down inside us, we are magically, beautifully, wonderfully made. God don't make no junk. So we are wonderfully made, and it's amazing how our bodies have withstood the abuse that we have imposed on it throughout these years.
Well, I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm grateful that God is using me in this way. I don't take any credit for any of this. It's what I believe I was born to do. One of the things that we try to talk about is purpose. Many of us live an entire life without understanding our purpose for being here. And I believe I understand my purpose for being here, and it's that. Despite any flaws I might have, and I'll take credit for all of those, but at the end of the day, all of us have something special that we can do. What you're doing is bringing this information by way of television to many people. And we just should not focus on the acquisition of things, but the fulfillment of purpose. And when you walk in purpose, then you don't worry about other things. You're not worried about what kind of car you drive. You're not worried about what kind of house you live in, what brand name your shoes are, and all that other artificial stuff, which means absolutely nothing, which is just another way to be taken off course as you try to stay on your course for purpose. So we have to walk in purpose. And that's what you're doing. People who come and do these kinds of shows that we should be greatly appreciative of, because you're walking in purpose. You're called. You're moved. And so that's so important, and I thank God for you.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God.
That's right.
And all things
will be added upon
will be added to you.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
You are
Dr.
so
Terry
welcome.
Mason. You are such a joy.
I just appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. Anytime you want me to come, I'd be happy to.
Well, you know I'm going to call on you, don't you? You can't keep running out here doing all these things in front of my face and think I'm not going to expose you.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and
Let us share one mind through a vision of our future, while we're holding hands to form a circle around our motherland. From all around the world, she is calling home her children. One mind will take us